Good. Now we can start with that one. So, hello, my name is Ignacy, and I'm ACA for the PSDC tournaments, and you might know me from being a part of the WSDC Team Poland for championship in Macau, and part of a training team for WSDC team previous year. So what am I going to do today, and what we are going to do today is talk a bit and try to access with exercises on how to prioritize materials that you have already. Why do we even think that it is important to do so in the first place? I believe that, first of all, you have a lot of feedbacks and a lot of verdicts decided and given to you by judges that are basically consistent on the fact that you did something really great. There were parts of speeches that were not so great, and probably you should focus more on something. And it is very often that after the debate, you are just wondering, yeah, probably I should have done that, but how could I knew that before? How could I knew that in the debate? So this is workshop consisting mainly on that. And how to deal with that kind of situation, how to deal with better arguments, better responses. And first of all, and the most important part of it is being cautious, that you are choosing every time you choose to run an argument. You are sacrificing your time to doing one thing for that you could probably have done something else, right? So this is always choice, this is always some form of prioritization. Okay, but where the utility of that workshop lies, where you could use those concepts that we're going to learn today, and where does being cautious about your speeches matter, right? Because it is not only in the fact that you have an argument and you're choosing which argument to run, which would be the content creation part of your team, right? If you have an impromptu motion, and you are going to have some on the PSDC, right? Then when you have an motion discussion and content ideas that you are going to run in a debate, then probably you have a lot of them, or you have sufficient amount to do more than 16 minutes of speeches in analysis, right? Because hey, those topics are really broad, right? It's a common idea that you have a lot of knowledge about the motions, and especially in the prep rounds where you could read a lot of material, you can come up with some really great ideas, some really great works of previous professors from articles, and you have tons and tons of knowledge to prioritize, right? Because you only have 8 minutes to create your content. So you have to choose something in the end. But also in debate decisions, right? Because note how every piece of material given to you in debate by your team and the other team, right, makes you choose in between what are you going to do with that, meaning that you can rebuttal, you can just basically ignore chunks of analysis. You can choose to not engage directly, but also indirectly, meaning that you're going to wait. And the most great example of that would be how we speakers tend to structurize their materials. What are they perceiving as being the greatest threat to them in the debate, and what are they not perceiving as such? But also, this comes down to outside of a debate decisions and inside of an argument decisions, right? If you have more than 3 people in team, you often do prioritize speakers that feel more comfortable within the debate, within the area of topic. So if you have someone who is really great at history or someone who is really great at economy, they would probably be willing more to debate that motion than someone who doesn't know about the topic so much, right? But also in argument decision is a part about your analysis that you tend to bring to the table, because there's a lot of mechanism to explain contents brought to you in debate, right? If you have an idea to prove some measure that there's more happiness in the world, the group of vulnerability is being harmed, there's probably a lot of analysis on how does that exactly happen, right? There's probably a multitude of ways to prove that. So you have to prioritize in every bit of those situations, right? So I hope that by the end of this workshop, you'll be better at making every bit of those decisions. And even if that's not going to be the case, and even if you are not going to, sorry, there's other people coming, and I have to have some, sorry, if there's another person I'm not seeing, is it, yeah, sorry for the thing, but like, let's just go back. Note that you're going to be at least a bit better in every time of those decisions. And if you're even not going to be better at those, then I hope it makes you a bit more cautious about how those decisions are made. And even if it is not translated to your immediate benefit, then maybe over time it gives you some form of advantage. And I hope it brings something for the table for you. But like the important question is, why do we even need to prioritize? Because like we know where, we know to an extent why, but look, you have 16 minutes of content speeches and it's only an like hour-long debate. And often, especially on like impromptu, prep motions, not impromptu, you're presented with like issues which seem to be complicated, that seem to be really advanced, and that seem to be like debates that are happening in real life to an extent, right? But note that there's probably tons of articles written, that there's probably tons of discussion happening, and there's ton of content on that matter being in the internet, being inside the public discussion. But you only have your 8 minutes, right? So you do have to prioritize because you do not have time to run everything you wish you could say. And this is especially a problem when you see another team making mistakes or just basically bringing an argument that you don't agree with, that you have a ton of rebuttal on, direct and indirect, aggressive and defensive, but you don't have time to say it all. So the big answer in time is that you have it limited and therefore should prioritize what is most efficient to win your debate, or obviously in debating kind of situation, but probably in motion type of situation, in argument running, in rebuttals prioritization. It is also a question for you, what does translate to winning the most? What is most efficient at bringing me from point A, being like, I have some form of material, to point B, translating that to a judge and winning the debate. Okay, so this workshop consists of one, it has like one pre-assumption about you, and it's that you know a bit about weighting and how does weighting work. But aside from the fact that you know what weighting is, I'll briefly explain a concept behind this and how do we weight arguments so that it is more clear to how you should weight those arguments, not only on a whip speech and in reply speech, but also inside your own minds while making decisions on the debate. Because like, I think some speakers are really great about are great in making weighting as a part of their speech. However, they do not cautiously think about how do they weight off their material in their own speeches, how much time do they spend on making one over the other, and yeah, so that would be the case. But first of all, criteria of weighting. I would say the like most important part of weighting is how that argument or your response or generally anything responds to the motion and fulfills the burden of proof. Meaning that if you have debate this house as you have to prioritize the needs and skill and like ability to think about the problem from the actor's perspective, right? Meaning that even if you create the most advanced, most brilliant argument that something should happen and it does not happen from the perspective of an actor, or the actor is not aware of it, like your argument is probably not that important in the debate and should be weighted off by simply you would hear speakers that are not so kind say that you are out of a debate, which is like the rude answer to that. But the kind answer is that you do not fulfill the burden of proof within the debate, and because of that, your argument responds to a different kind of motion, right? So this is how that weighting transitions into debate mostly. And because we debate in a schools debate, it actually is even more important because there's no one who, like you have to rely on your team members more, and your responding to the motion happens basically while preparing, so that you have less time in debate to make the shift to a decision, right? Second of all, metric is like probability. And I hope it is like really intuitive, and speakers tend to really talk about it like the most within the debates, right? So if you have any form of rebuttals within the debate, and starting from like really bottom of beginner level up to the up to advanced, you probably really often hear people waiting and attacking probability, right? Because like their argument does not happen. It does not happen the way they want it to happen. Or you would say that like, oh, the reasons they give for this argument are not good enough for them to prove the impact they wish they had. This means that really often probability is the most intuitive metric to attack by, but like you have to consider it, but it's not probably the only one that you should care about. Okay, so let's briefly talk about 5 other metrics. First of all, being the scale of your impact. And that is especially, like all of those weighting metrics are especially important when you consider how are you going to attack and what are you attacking and what are you bringing to the table. Because like note that those 5 like descriptions and weighting metrics apply to your own argument. And you should be cautious about what are you trying to prove and where does importance of your argument lie in. So some arguments are based on a scale of an impact, right? So if there's a huge population being affected by the argument or by the motion, then you should, even if the change for them is not really that great and they do not change their life based off of that argument, but they do suffer some form of consequence and they are in a great mass, then we probably should care about that argument because it affects a great amount of people. The second one is a depth of an impact, meaning that even if you do not adhere to like many people, and the change is not visible for like a mass, but you affect some lives really great, and people rely on that decision. And if the policy is, for example, introduced about like, I don't know, changing people and in bad economic conditions, it probably affects their life really much, right? Because like every help for that a person is probably to some form to at least on some part important, and therefore affects the life on a depth. And you should be cautious about it because like it is a really common argument to make, but like you have to be aware of how much do you affect the group of people that you're talking about? Where does that lie, and how does that compare to the status quo? The third part is time, short term and long term. You should always be cautious if your argument is happening now, if it is taking years to process, the processes of like socialization and the process of social change from like I don't know, building a democratic state, of like building a good democracy values, teaching people something like in ecology motions, you could have something like basically telling that people will change their minds about some solutions because of the fact that we are introducing some form of education. But like notice that those arguments are happening in real life, right? Because like to an extent, the policies brought up and the motions you discuss are some form of real life discussions. Therefore, you should know that the arguments and the effects that you're talking about will happen in a time period within real life. And sometimes it is like short time period, so that effects of the policy, effects of the motion are visible within a year or two, or within a month, or immediately after it is introduced, or it is happening on a very slow pace, meaning that the visible effects of the solution or of the motion are going to be visible only in the long term. Being aware of that enables you to weigh off short versus long term, because like it is happening now or it is happening later, but we have a greater change or whatever. Fourth of all, reversibility. And the reversibility is not that intuitive concept at first, but like note that we do weigh off that sometimes. Because like if we made a mistake in life, we want it to be reversible, or we want to be able to deal with the consequences somehow. And therefore, reversibility of a change is to some extent a waiting point, meaning that taking options to act in the future for yourself is not the greatest idea after all, because like if you make a solution and it does not work, you're not going to be able to fix it in the future. So to an extent, reversibility is a weighting factor and should not be overlooked, especially in like changing motions, in like policy motions. And fifth of all, happening often and connected often to the depth of an impact is the vulnerability of a group. So impacts that you make and arguments that you make affect different groups differently. And probably those different groups have different characteristics, right? Probably if you're living in a big city, you have a bit of a different characterization and characteristic within the debate, especially than, I don't know, minority groups are different than majority groups, right? And the vulnerability of a group is the criteria that you most oftenly seen as a form of explanation that some groups are more dependent on that solution as well. And the depth of an argument happens on them the most. But also that they should be treated with special care because of the fact that they are vulnerability groups. So yeah, that's basically the criteria of weighting. And why we discuss them here and now is because of the fact that if you are aware of where the strength of your argument lies, probably you are better dealing off with the arguments of the other side, right? Because if the strength of your argument lies within the responding to the motion and probability, and the scale of your impact or depth of an impact is not that great, but the other side has like great impacts on a great scale, but not in the motion, then probably you will weight them off at the criteria that you're good at. And you're probably going to attack them at the criteria you are good at and they are not. So for example, if you rebuttal, then you should take part on like probability and responding to the motion rather than the scale and depth of an impact that they've proven. But moving on from that, let's exercise that and let's talk a bit about how does that work in real life and how does that work within the debate. Okay, so I'll give you a moment to read that. It's a motion from WSDC Macau, and we'll talk a bit about prioritization of the cases. I'll give you like additional 30 seconds. Okay, I hope that you read it and it's all fine. Is there something that needs explanation within that motion or within the arguments? Okay, so what I want you to do with that arguments now and with like brief case and brief summary is to tell me which case, if you only have to, and you need to run one of them in the debate, what case would you run as a proposition team? Would you focus on movements being effective, or that social justice movement inherently stand against power structure? And why? Yeah, well, not all at once, but like, okay, so let's make it a bit simpler exercise. Where does the strength of a movements are more effective argument lies? Yeah, sure, go ahead.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Because I'm having problem about with seeing the presentation. It shows me like the one, I don't know, first slide. It's more like first slide. I can see, the motion and the things you are talking about.
This house prefers leaderless social justice movements.
Okay, thank you.
Or do you see the slide? Or
I see other slide. It shows me crucial skill weighting, not the slide that we are on right now.
Do you see it now? Or is that a problem for everybody? Can you let me know in chat?
I still can't see the first one with priorities, so I think it's even worse in my aspect.
Oh, okay, that's going to be a bit of a problem then. Oh. It's happening still. Can you see the slides now?
Yeah, I can see. Yes, it's okay now.
Okay, sorry for the mistake on my part. So this is going to be a bit embarrassing. Sorry. So there's a motion this house prefers leaderless social justice movements, like compared to leader-led social justice movements. And here you have a brief summary of proposition case and opposition case. And if you were a proposition speaker in that debate, which argument would you run if you're in a proposition team, and why? So I'll give you a moment to think about it, and when you are ready, let me know.
I actually, sorry, I actually can't see the screen, so maybe I will just log out and log back in.
Oh yeah, sure.
Because it's a problem with my computer.
Sure. Is anybody else experiencing the same problem?
I guess I can see everything now, so.
Oh, yeah, great. So, which argument would you prioritize as proposition team in that debate? Hello again.
No, I don't have a problem. I just see all.
Great. So the exercise goes like you are a proposition team within the debates. You have two claims to run. You probably could run movements are more effective or social justice movements inherently stand against a power structure. Therefore, they should be leaderless because of it. Which one would you run and why? If you only had a possibility to run one. Okay, let's make this exercise easier. Would you prefer to debate proposition or opposition in this debate? And why? Oh, I kind of rely on you with that one. So like for the workshop to be effective for you and for you to like understand the concept of preference, and why do we prioritize one argument over another? I think like there's need to do it in like one way or another, right? So obviously you can do that in arguments and within debates, which like probably the end goal of that workshop, right? That you in the end will do it in a debate. But I want this workshop to be an open ability to practice before you do that, right? Before you prioritize your own material within debate. There's like less reversible and like basically trying out. Don't be afraid to make like any form of mistake here. It's not problematic at all. Nina, what would you prioritize?
I think that social justice movements inherently stand against power structure.
Okay, why is that?
Because when you're like standing against the power, it can like have an impact what is going to happen in like all country, you can say, because if there are going like many social movements, it can make like civil war. So that's why I think that this argument, when we are saying about the power and that the social justice movements should be leaderless, that is for me like more important.
Okay, so it's more important for the movement to be leaderless because if they achieve social change, there is no leader arising from that. And it is more important than the change happening, right? If I understand correctly.
Yeah, also when like when a movement won't have a leader in the moment right now, it will be, I'm sure that it will have a leader in really close time, because people will need to have a leader, the person who will decide about their like actions.
Okay, so to be specific in that motion, this is kind of like prefers motion in which like you would have to be leaderless social justice movement till the end. So like you do not have any form of leader. and all the things and all the decisions to gather to have any form of agenda happen from the bottom to the top, meaning that the leader never arises in that form of situation. It is not to say that in real life those social justice movements would never develop a leader, and that it is not probable for them to develop it. It's highly probable, but in this debate we are sort of in a position in which we have to imagine two different social justice movements. One that has clear leadership and that have like one spokesperson advocating for it, or like 10 or whatever, and the other one does not have that at any given point in time. So it is only people spontaneously gathering under the like similar agenda. So how could you imagine it is that to an extent the I don't know, youth climate strike has a leader, or like even informal leader, right? So it would be like in the past Greta Thunberg, but the Black Lives Matter protests did not have a clear leadership structure at the time. So then, I don't know, Hannah, how could you decide on most effective proposition case? Which one would you run and why? Do you agree? Do you agree with Nina?
I think I do agree, and I would say that the second one is we can see the mechanism more in the second point. And the first one is too short for me. I don't know if you understand. Just in the second one, I can see this this events happening. That we have no leader because those social justice movements, they stand against power structure, and if they stand against power structure, then we should not have this leader because of it. And so I would say that the second point is better. And also you asked about the side, and I would say that I'm more into opposition. But yeah, about proposition, that's all I think.
Okay. So how I like created those cases is like without the thing about probability. So I do not think of probability at all. Because mostly, I don't know, how do you create cases? Do you write them down with the probability on impromptu motions when you have like limited time to prep? Do you have like a gathered bundle of ideas on a table, and then you decide on which one to choose, and then create the probability for it, then describe mechanism, why are they happening? Or do you from the get-go get into the probability and describe mechanism and then describe impacts and the arguments themselves? How are you?
I think I start with the argument, and then I prepare a mechanism. Okay. Because it's for me it's just it's more my style of doing this, and but actually and it's also way easier to see the impact if I've got the argument already in my head. Sure. So I think that's the way I do it. And also after that, after creating an argument, I can see which one is better, and after making this whole mechanism, I can decide which to be more described in my speech. So I think I do it this way.
Okay, that's totally fine, and I think like that's the more. I think first of all common, but second of all, it does not limit you to the mechanism you got. So if you're saying the impacts, then you're actually thinking about those metrics of weighting in the first place, right? Because like you can compare the impacts and then develop mechanism for it to be proven. So I think to an extent, the inherently standing against the power structure would need to be proven, meaning that at the point, I don't clearly see why do social justice movements need exactly to stand against the power structure itself rather than how the power is distributed. But I think like very important metric of weighting and prioritizing arguments, and especially visible on this example, right? I probably would prioritize differently. But the most important metric of it all is how you feel about the cases, right? Why is it so important? I believe that it is better to run the case that you are convinced is true and are able to develop more mechanism than to be inclined and tempted to run a case that you don't clearly understand and cannot therefore prove, even if on a paper it is better objectively, right? This is because most of the times delivery is very important, right? Even if you have the greatest claim in the world and you are not understanding it, how to prove that, and you end up just saying the claim and not bringing judge from the point A, having the statement to point B, understanding the impact and being fully able to credit that, then probably it is not worth it at all, right? I think you're preferring opposition. I heard the voice. So we are going to transition to oppositions. Like, let's say opposition team tries to make a claim. On their side, the movement is more effective, meaning that social justice movement with a leader is able to achieve the social change more. They have 5 mechanisms on the table to prove it. First of all, they could say it's more effective and more efficient within their members, because if you have a power structure, you can organize better. It's easier to manage because you have someone who is like basically saying, there's a protest on that hour, that day, and people show up. Therefore, it's like more effective because it is able to gather more people within the certain time and be able to show their power, and therefore achieve social movements efficiency to some point. Second of all, they could say that the charismatic leadership brings people to join, therefore achieving efficiency, as the power of a movement is reliant on a number of members. Third of all, they are less likely to be false flagged, meaning that, for example, if you have a leader-led movement being accused of some form of agenda forming, for example, I don't know, ecological move, not pro climate change, but like anti-climate change and climate change, people who support obligation to and policies to stop the climate change, and you have a leader figure being accused of the movement making agenda on, I don't know, supporting a certain country, being opposing to a certain idea that is widely accepted in the society. That leader is able to tell you, this is not our agenda, we only fight for this solution to be implemented. Therefore, you're not false flagged with a thing that you do not stand with as your solutions. Fourth of all, it is more efficient because, like, when making policies, if you are a prime minister or if you are a government, then you have a person to negotiate the solutions with. For example, it is like just basically the politicians are basically able to, hey, let's say that, hey, let's meet up, and we know who to meet up and make a decision with, meaning that we will impose, we will have a solution, we will have a policy made, but you stop the protesting. Therefore, efficiency. And 5, if you have a leadership within the movement, then you have clear statement. There is not a whole bunch of people basically fighting for different things, because like you have 1, 2, 3, 4 postulates addressed by the movement and created and presented by the leader of the movement. Therefore, it is like way more efficient to fight for those specific things rather than to fight for the cause in general, because like it is like then harder to make policies. Okay, but honestly, you heard me trying to bring every mechanism, and it taken me a lot of time just to simply explain the brief summary of what those mechanisms are. It's really problematic, because if I try to make them 5 work, it would take me too much of time, right? I would spend like way over 80 minutes on that. And like, considering that I have to explain the impacts of social movements being effective, or how are they effective, how does that look like, to bring some form of characterization to the table, I would spend way more time and way over the time I am given. Therefore, we have to prioritize. But how and which statement, which mechanism that is supporting the claim that movement is more efficient and effective, would you choose to mechanize that argument for it to work? Which one is the strongest to prove the claim for you? I don't know. Róża?
I think I don't see your slide again.
You don't.
Yeah,
Nina,
I mean,
Hannah.
I see the wrong one.
So which one do you see?
Movement is more effective.
It's exactly that. And you have
Oh, okay.
5 sentences below. Easier to manage with power structure. Charismatic leadership brings more people to join, less likely to be false flagged. Authorities know who to negotiate with. Clear statements. So which mechanism is the most important to prove the claim that movement is more effective?
I think I would choose that it's easier to manage with power structure.
Now, why is that? You can choose more, obviously. You can choose like 2 or 3.
Also, authorities know who to negotiate with.
Yep.
And charismatic leadership brings more people to join.
Okay. Why
Yes,
those
I
over?
don't think that the other 2 ones are as important for debate
Why is that?
as the other 3. I don't think that the clear statements are somehow provided by the leader, but it's like the whole movement job to clear them and to address them. And I don't think so that by one person you can say it's false flagged or not. You need to like have more people to say that.
Okay, so you would say that the 3 other claims are like more probable for you? And if they're more probable, then it is better to bring them, because at least your claim is going to be proven, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I think that's a very fair claim. It's the probability metric being like very important in debating, because like you have to prove the claims. Yeah, I would say that it's like very fair structure. And if you had to, I don't know, try to think which of those mechanisms bring the most depth to analysis. Which of those are the most impactful, as in bring the most quality of change to effectiveness, which would mean the most for movement's efficiency. Not only on like probability metric.
I think bringing more people to join, because when you have more people, you have the bigger impact on the society, so you are more effective.
Okay, so
And
like
and every new person can like bring another person to your movement, and then you have very, very big impact on society.
Okay, so like the most important metric within the argument of efficiency is amount of people that are joining your movement. Therefore, the most depth on an impact of efficiency lies within the people, and we should be cautious of that, and therefore choose on that basically. Okay, so this is the most important mechanism for you because of the probability and because of the proven impact. Yep. Probably if you're able to prove that charismatic leadership happens in the first place, which I don't think is always the case, because like you obviously don't you can prove that obviously like leader need to be charismatic to become a leader in the first place. But like perceives just basically our understanding of what charisma is different, I think, for every person to an extent. And are the leaders always charismatic? I think it is probable you have to expand a lot of every of those arguments and every of those mechanisms to work, because like on the note of one sentence, it's probably to say that I don't know how it is easier to manage with power structure, and how does managing come with power structure. But note that it is very cautiously chosen which mechanism is the most important for us. If the most important mechanism for us is the charismatic leadership brings more people to join, it brings us certain answers within the debate. First of all, if you believe that charismatic leadership brings more people to join is the most important mechanism, you have to spend the most of time on it. You have to develop it the most. You have to say about the probability the most. You would spend most time saying, well, why are the leaders charismatic? How are they bringing people to join in the first place? What does incentivize people to join movements in the first place, right? Why are they convinced, and what is the tipping point for them to, I don't know, go for a demonstration or sign a petition? And if you do that cautiously, you also have a response when somebody attacks your claims, right? So if you have like three mechanisms for your argument that movement is more efficient, for example, you have that easier to manage with power structure, charismatic leadership brings more people to join, and authorities know who to negotiate with, for example, right? And somebody attacks, authorities know who to negotiate with, win their rebuttals. You do not care about it because the most important and the most time you spent on another mechanism, right? So you rely mostly on the charismatic leadership, and if the authorities do not exactly know who to negotiate with, or there's no change between the side of a house, then you still explained why charismatic leadership brings more people to join, and that is the most important premise of your argument. So you can, like, to an extent, deprioritize rebuttal to that mechanism because you have other mechanism that is more important and more proven to you, and you are fighting for it most as a team. Okay, so let's move to the next. Imagine that you are DP on your DPM speech, and you hear that argument being made from opposition team. They say on opposition, they say that leader-led movement is better because it's more efficient. So you are at the second on making the second speech of the proposition, which is DPM. Sorry, I use that DPM rather than the second speech of the proposition. But you are beginning your speech and you have enough time to make a rebuttal, to make waiting, or to just basically develop your own claim after hearing, obviously, that argument from the opposition team. Which one would you decide to do at the beginning of your speech and basically like just going out to make your speech? I don't know, Hannah, which one would you do?
I would say that I wouldn't do the first one for sure.
Why?
Like in the sense of defensiveness, because I would say that I would show the mechanism more, just in terms of the situation in which also the judges think the same as the side, the opposition, I guess, yeah, no, or the proposition, like the other side. So I would say that I would show the mechanism more, and I would expand this argument more, just to show that that it's on our side, not on the other.
Okay, so you
I
like
would, I would say that the third one is
the third one.
my
No, so the third one, like as a second speech of proposition, you already have like an argument made, right? So by only adding to that case and assuming your speaker proven anything, you're expanding your own argument and not engaging with the opposition argument. Do I understand it like clear?
No, I would say that I would respond, but not in a defensive way.
Okay.
Not in like aggressive way, but I would show them that they are not right and that it's my point and not their.
Okay. So maybe I'll clarify, because I thought that I've seen a bit of people on Mariana workshop, but like what I mean by defensive and offensive rebuttal is not like being mean or screaming at somebody, because that's totally what we are not going to do and what we are not going to credit. And basically we are expecting every speaker in a debate to be kind and respectful to other speakers. Because of that, offensive rebuttal means that you are not only proving that the opposition does not fulfill their burden. By that, I mean, rebuttal would, in this debate, defensive look like the movement is not effective on your side of the house at all, and you are not proven, and you have not proven it. Therefore, your effectiveness is 0. But offensive rebuttal would be something like, you say that efficiency is important and effectiveness is important, but actually it is not effective on your side of the house. It is more effective on our side, meaning it is movement is more effective on proposition. So if I understood you correctly, you would engage in an offensive way with the argument of opposition. To an extent.
Yeah, to the extent, yeah.
Great. Okay. I don't know. Nina, would you dismiss the clash as non-valuable?
I'm not sure.
Like, would you say that, oh, the opposition team, like, imagine you start your speech and you are saying something along the lines of, the opposition brings you an argument that movements, social justice movements, are more effective on their side of the house. It is not important at all, or not important to have effective social justice movements, it is more important to have our argument or our impacts, which would be like, I don't know, principle, to have principle of social justice movements met, and they are, I don't know, being leaderless because leaders are bad, and we stand against the inherent power structure which is formed around the leaders. So that would be like the second response and second line.
I'm not so sure about it because I'm sure that if I would like, I don't know, I had to choose one of these three sentences, I would choose the third, none of the above, and I would focus on bringing more analysis and expanding my own argument.
Why is that? Why wouldn't you rebuttal the claim?
Mostly because while I'm bringing more analysis to our case, it could help either my team to like check if we don't have any, I don't know, mistake, and expand with my own argument, because I could show why their argument is wrong from point of my house. Like,
if you're saying that their argument is wrong, then you are rebutting them. To an extent, at least.
Yeah, but mostly I would like focus on analysis.
Okay. So we think like rebuttal to the like claim of an opposition side is less important than having your own analysis. What I would say to that is, obviously it is better to have your own case, right? You have to have your own case and you have to have your own analysis. Because if you don't bring your any argument to the table as a proposition team, you're not going to be able to win against even the poorest argument of opposition side, right? Because like they have an argument and you don't then. I would say that the rebuttal is very important part of the debate, meaning that if you're effectively able to prove and to bring down the argument of side up, then you are making a great job at DPM especially. Because like the DPM speaker and DPM speech can be consistent of like rebuttals with like rebuilding of your own case, bringing new analysis. It can do all. So it's like purely dependent on what does the op say and what do you think is most important to do in debate. If you lack an argument, then you should desperately make one. But if the claim from op side is like really harmful to your case, and as a proposition you run the same case, then probably you would have to focus a bit on rebuttals. But what I want to say about the second, like those probably are two good choices to go, right? Because like if you say you see that the opposition argument is not made very well, you just like overlook the rebuttals and like just go straight to it, like drop simple 2 lines of rebuttal and like move on and expand on your own arguments is fine. If you choose the other way around and like be really consistent on the offensive rebuttals and bringing down the ops case and like only adding the 2 lines of analysis to your own case is also pretty good, just depending on the conditions. But like note that if you say that the effectiveness of social justice movements is not important at all, then there is a probability that you harm your own case in the process. So I think what proposition runs in this debate is both a note of efficiency, meaning that they have to prove that to some extent, efficiency of social justice movements is what we want to achieve, right? Like we want social justice movements to be powerful, to achieve social change in one way or another. even if you run the second argument as well alongside the lines of if you stand against the inherent power structure, you need to be leaderless yourself. You at least need to care a bit about efficiency. So if you just say that efficiency is not valuable at all, or try to weight off efficient justice movement against any form of other arguments, you are really vulnerable in that debate. Because your only form of engagement would be like just basically ignoring the clash, or counting is like less vulnerable, right? But the most important factor would be that you would harm your own case in the process. Because if you weight clashes, right, and you make argument on one of the clashes, and it is important for you, and you spend the time on it, then it probably is important within the debate, right? For your own sake, right? Because the weighting would be the same for both sides, right? You would also harm your own. And this is something you have to be cautious about. If a line of rebuttal and if a line of weighting is harming your case as well as the other team's case, it is probably really not worth to run it. First of all, because in schools debate, you would come as an inconsistent team, and therefore like lose some points on consistency, and second of all, on strategy note, right? Because you are not strategically thinking about the debate if you are harming your own cases. But second of all, the note about inconsistency is that from a judge's perspective, we have to accept which one of lines of analysis is the one that you run. If you have two clashing statements within one team, we do not exactly know which one of those statements is true if you prove to us that both are true, right? So if we on the first speech say, oh, it is important that we have efficient justice movement, and on the second he would say, the efficiency is not that important, let's just focus on something else, you would come as clashing within your own team, and that's kind of bad. Okay, so let's move to prioritizing rebuttals. But first of all, I want you to read the motion and the info slide to that motion. Info slides, I hope you know what the info slide is, but like just on a note of revision, it's like an explanation and also the information that you cannot challenge. This is really important because you have to take the info slide as given, even if you have some additional form of knowledge towards commanding distance, and you would disagree with the commanding distance being that narrow, or being defined in that way, it is still the info slide standing. So I'll give you like additional, I don't know, 30 seconds to read it and to think about what arguments could be made in that debate. What is the area of clash here? Okay, Hannah, did you read the info slide and the motion? And did you think about the possible arguments to be made?
I've read. I think that about arguments, it's a quite interesting thesis, I can say. I would say that the first argument is that this is just we can't, when we this approach, this military approach is just without emotions and without sensitivity, is just not human thing. I can
Mhm.
say. And showing no emotion can be, for the first place, quite hard for this person, and also for the subordinates to just have this on daily routine, as a daily routine, just not to show emotions and not to being exposed to emotions, and then just leaving this space with no emotion would be quite harmful for them, because then those it just accumulates in them, and it is just not healthy for their psychological condition, might be.
Okay, so from the proposition's perspective, the important part is that it harms the commanders to some extent because they are not
Yes.
able to show their human conditions and emotions, and like they're basically forced to be some form of a machine, even if they are feeling something deep inside. And it is like harmful for the soldiers from the subordinates' perspective, because they do not have anyone to relate to, or because like they're not, like they have to deal with on daily basis with the commanders being mean and emotionless towards them, right?
Yeah, that's what I meant actually. Yes.
Okay, so that's really great. Do you have any additional points, or do you have any form of an argument on the opposition side? What would they fight for, and why?
So I would say that this professional aspect, that just we need to, in the society, we need to have some roles in life, and being here as a soldier, for example, we have this soldier role, and we need to fight, we need to be physically we need to work physically, and we need to focus on different things than in real life, in the outside life. So we need to have a role with, for example, no emotion, just in case to be professional and to make what we need to do,
Okay.
what we need to do. Yeah.
So like the army would be more efficient with being
Yes.
emotionless and purely professional.
Yes, and it's quite it's quite common, because in everyday life we have some roles, so it wouldn't be as abnormal as the proposition says.
Okay, very important. Nina, do you have any other claims?
No, I actually agree with Hannah. Also, like for pro is we say that we should express emotion, is because it can help with our communication. Because if we say something with straight face, someone can have difficulties with understanding what we are saying, because like expressing emotion is a big part of communication.
Okay, so the communication is worse. If the communication is worse, then the army is less efficient, because we are likely to make a mistake and to some
Yes.
extent miscalculate on the part that we are understanding our commanders. Fair.
And for OPA, I think it could be like if we have this purely professional relationship, it can help us with making decision. Like on a war, if we are in a relationship like friendship, where a friend got hurt, we could have a problem with deciding if we are leaving him or we are taking him with us and trying to help him to survive. And it could cost our lives, and it can like impact on the winning. It can like impact if we win or we lose.
Okay, so it's like just basically relationship disable your ability to choose the most efficient thing.
Yeah,
Meaning
what's
that,
more
yeah,
important?
exactly. So like they affect your prioritization in a way. So that would mean like the army is more efficient without that emotional factor. It would mean that like commanders and also soldiers are more hurt because of that, right? Because like they have the emotion factor within the decisions also. So like it's worse for the commander because he feels emotion towards his subordinates more, and he's possibly more hurt by losing the soldiers, and the soldiers are being hurt because of that relationship between them, right?
Yes.
Okay, so here I have a couple of like we basically almost nailed every one of them. It is a debate. Jesus, I made a spelling mistake. This is so embarrassing now. But basically, what is an additional point on proposition that was run in this debate that I was debating at was that we, because of that emotional factor, if we oppose the military approach, then we care about the soldiers more. If we care about the soldiers more, then by bonding between them, it goes up the ladder. And if it goes up the ladder and your commanders care about the soldiers more, they're less likely to begin to have the war to begin with. It is low on probability at the point that I cannot explain that argument, and I think it's like low probability in the case of being able to even prove that claim in the first place. But like, assuming you are an opposition in that debate, what would you prioritize? Because you have three claims. It's efficiency of an army that you want to achieve, because like it can work more efficiently without the emotion, right? Therefore, we should not oppose the military approach. You could prioritize the well-being of commanders and of soldiers. Which do you think is most important to prioritize in this debate, and why? I don't know. If you want to join, Ala, and
Okay, I think I would prioritize like efficiency because it's something like it's quite strong on a position. Because like we can argue that soldiers would have like better life, but I think I think there could be wash on that case for soldiers, but army is more efficient on our side as the opposition because like commands are more taken serious if you aren't in a relationship with your commander, I think.
okay, so it is more important to have army efficient than to have happy soldiers. And why is that? Exactly. So like I know that you are able to prove more than the army is efficient, and I totally respect this is an important metric of weighting. If you are able to prove something more, then you should probably run it, right? But like, do you think that it is like more important to have army efficient or to have happy soldiers because of the lack of relationship thing?
Like somehow happy soldiers can make our army more efficient, but the goal of the army is not to optimize the happiness of the soldiers, is to like be efficient as a military unit.
Okay, totally. I think it's a very fair point of weighting, right? So it would consist of basically saying that, oh, you know, soldiers are not happy because they're in the army, basically, right? Being happy because of being in the army is probably like a really a condition. And we all do rely on the army being efficient, right? To protect us. And if it is so, we are able to sacrifice their well-being and their happiness for the safety of the people, and we need the army to be efficient to secure that safety, right? So every cell of society has to be efficient for the society to work, and the army is very important cell of the society. Therefore, we prioritize the efficiency. Okay. Because of the fact that we have to finish today a bit earlier, we are heading towards the unfortunately, we are heading towards the end of the workshop. But I want to walk out of here with 3 thoughts in mind. First of all, being like, we can talk about the metrics of waiting all day. And in the end, if you are not able to prove your arguments or be comfortable with your arguments, be comfortable with making the arguments in the first place, then you are not going to be very much efficient with them. And you probably should deprioritize them, right? It is a really simple thing that if you have an argument that you are more likely to agree with it, are able to develop more lines of analysis to it, and feel more comfortable delivering it in the third point, right? If you go out and make your speech and are more convinced and more comfortable, then even the fact that you are more comfortable on your speech probably makes the delivery stronger and makes the judge, I don't know, like write down more or understand more of what your argument is. Therefore, it is a very important factor to consider. How are you feeling about making that argument? And if you're not feeling very comfortable with it, then you should probably deprioritize it. Second of all, second thought that I want you to leave with is a charitable approach to your opponents. Being strategic about your choices and being strategic about your prioritization requires you to be a bit charitable, meaning that you are to some extent required to acknowledge that the other side might make a good argument and might achieve some form of impact. But the prioritization comes when we have 2 impacts, and waiting comes when you have 2 proven impacts, and we should still prioritize something in the end. And by that, if you are charitable and know what you should prioritize in the end, you're coming off stronger within the debate, because not only you are saying that the other side is not proving something, but even if they are proving it, we also should prioritize our impacts and our side of the house with our arguments. Therefore, being more competent of a team within the debate. And third thing I want you to leave here with is the most important thing. The one most important thing. Even if you do not remember the previous 2, the most important thing about all of this workshop is being conscious about it, right? Being conscious about where does the strength of your argument lie. Second of all, being conscious about the prioritization of a choice you are making every second of your speech, right? It is to say, why is that? It is because if you're conscious about the choices you've made and why you have made them, it is only then that you can review them. If you do not know why you chose one argument over the other, then if the judge says that you probably should have run the other case, you're not able to fix it at all, because you don't know why you chose the case over the other. Same comes with rebuttals. If your rebuttal is not efficient enough and you do not know why you chose this way to rebuttal over the other you had, then probably you're not able to target your own choices. Only by being conscious about your own choices, you're able to, I don't know, change them in the future or change the way that you are making them. But this requires you to be conscious. And on that note, unfortunately, we have to end. And on that slide, I want to thank you for participation in the workshop. I want to thank you for your participation and willingness to work and to do exercises with me and to spend an evening on debates and preparing to PSDC. I hope I am seeing you on Saturday. And on that note, I wish you a very pleasant evening and the rest of it. And thank you for coming.
Thank you a lot. And see you.
Thank you.